Hey, how's it going? I'm Dan Fredenberg, and this is for FIGGERRIDOUT.com. It's got a bunch of weird stuff because, after all, this is the internet, and just being in real estate or investing and all that kind of stuff, that's not enough to really get people to watch you on a regular basis. So I talk to super duper cool people, just like my new friend Chris Galizio. How are you doing today, Chris?
Happy to be here. We had a great chess game yesterday. Should be another fun day.
Absolutely. And this time we won't be as distracted because that's pretty tough. Now, just so you know, and I'll dial you in here, the Figure It Out Dream Job series is what this is a contribution towards as far as a body of work. The dream job holders that I have on those interviews, they're actually quite deliberately for you, which is, I'm thinking maybe you're feeling a change of career coming on or something like that, and you maybe want to go for a really audacious goal like becoming a Broadway opera singer, or in Chris's example, it is being an independent filmmaker who has actually brought the film to fruition and actually had it play in major cities, film festivals, and even win. But before we get too excited about that sort of thing, I just want to emphasize, if you want to make those big choices, the limitations might be threefold. And I always ask, how can you get there if you have no friends, no family, and no cash? Is it still possible? What sort of personality traits need to be cultivated if you're going to be successful in that way? And which ones need to be eliminated? What sort of things just basically make it a dead end? But before we get too excited about that, Chris, can you please introduce yourself in whatever way you normally do, and we'll get to those specific.
My name's Chris Galizio. I'm right now the executive producer of Money Game. It's a film that we just made. We've actually gone to a bunch of film festivals. We've gone to basically 5 film festivals and won 5 Best Film Awards so far, which is a really hard thing to do. I would not say that I'm a movie person. I would argue that I'm a finance person. I spent my first 30 years of my career at Pioneer Investments, running emerging markets. Then I switched over to Fidelity. I ran a growth fund from I grew a growth fund from 20 million to 7 billion at Fidelity. Then I ran a hedge fund for a couple of years. Started to notice that nothing makes sense. I wrote a white paper about it called the $340 trillion problem, referring to the dollar as the global reserve currency. But nobody reads white papers, so I decided to make a movie so that everyone would see it.
I love it, and you were kind enough to share that. I had my own private screening, so yeah, I'm feeling like a big deal now. This is really cool, but yeah, I would consider myself to be a connoisseur of film, which I know is an arrogant thing to say, but I can fill in the blanks a little bit about that. One of the things is, if you're living on the other side of the world for a long time, you're going to be watching a lot of movies. One of my favorite things about living in Taiwan, as a matter of fact, as it relates to movies, is, they say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. And therefore, you shouldn't judge. I'm dating myself already. I'm going back to like Blockbuster days here. Like judging a film by its DVD case is something that I had to do quite often. And I had one additional benefit. Like I got to the point even before I went to Taiwan where I watched enough movies that I didn't want to know anything about the film at all, because I wanted to experience the story the way that the protagonist experiences the story. And I find, like, like for example, The Matrix, the famous line is, unfortunately nobody can be told what the Matrix is, but if you look at the back of the DVD case, that's exactly what they do.
Right.
Right. So, but I noticed that with the Money Game, it uses the the screenwriting format of major movies. There has to be a love interest, there has to be this, that, and the other thing, and so I'm glad that you checked that box, because that's something that I've been interested in. But how about you give us the back of the DVD case description of Money Game, and then we can get into some more details about it.
I actually think you're dead on when you say the Matrix, because what you're living in today is the Matrix. If 2 plus 2 no longer equals 4, and I think there was a quote from George Orwell: "If 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4, then if 2 plus 2 equals 4, then everything else goes online." But you're sitting in a world where 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. You're looking at companies, GameStop, CrowdStrike, Boeing, all these companies lose money. They lose money every year. So why are they trading at billions of dollars? Because, my opinion, the Fed's manipulating interest rates. So what is the money game? The money game is the value. Professor Gardner will step in. It's the first time you'll meet him. He'll say, finance is the simplest subject you'll ever learn. It's the value of $1 paid annually. If I give you $1 for the rest of your life, how much would you pay for it? And the only thing you need to know is the interest rate. So it's $1 divided by interest rate. So if interest rates are 10%, it's 1 divided by 10%. It's behind Professor Gardner. It's worth $10. If interest rates fall, and we all know this, as interest rates fall, asset prices rise. So when interest rates fall to 1%, now it's worth $100. And understand, as you go to further and lower and lower and lower, it goes the value of the $1 paid annually goes up exponentially. So when we shot the movie, interest rates were 0.66%. So that's $152. Professor Gardner will say, who here, and he's telling a day one students at community college, who here is willing to give me $152 if I give you $1 for the rest of your life? The dumbest kid in the class says, hell no, we'd all be dead by the time we broke even. To which the Professor Gardner says, correct. And that's what you're watching in markets. So the Fed has removed risk. So he says, what would happen if interest rates go negative? Well, we all know as interest rates are falling, asset prices are now going up exponentially, right? So if interest rates go negative, all assets are worth infinite. Professor Gardner will say, my coffee is worth infinite. My desk is worth infinite. My chalkboard is worth infinite. Does that make sense? Of course, it doesn't make sense.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the main parts of the movie that I wanted to discuss with you a little bit because I think that people generally have trouble with the idea of infinity or infinite, or even infinitesimal. So it doesn't matter if it's like big infinity or little itty bitty infinity.
100%.
People tend to struggle with it. And so I think that part of calling something saying its value is infinite, the cup of coffee, basically what we're talking about is we're talking about a commodity, and if you have a negative interest rate, then it gains an infinite value, and what it actually is reflecting though is the value of the currency approaches more and more like closer and closer to zero, which is what happens when you have hyperinflation. So the anecdotal stories that I heard in Argentina for hyperinflation is like literally, you've got price tags on top of price tags on top of price tags, just because the items on the shelf they go up in price too fast. Now, of course, Argentina's situation is apparently, allegedly different right now, but is that like does that? I'm just concerned that saying that the cup of coffee has an infinite value. It's tough to really get across into people's heads, and I'm wondering about some alternative ways to describe it, and that's one that makes sense. But I think it also goes into a cap rate when you're talking about like commercial real estate, for example, or a cash on cash rate. Whereas that, like, if the asset actually makes you money, then it would get an infinite value. Whereas the only way that a cup of coffee could have an infinite value would be if the currency used to purchase it becomes worthless.
Correct. And
So,
so by manipulating rates, what you're doing is you're removing risk from the system, right? If you're the money game, if you're manipulating rates. So Professor Gardner will say, but here's the problem. We give you an analogy. What would if Here's the problem. Capitalism requires risk, interest rates, to allocate scarce resources. What would happen if I removed the lions, active managers, risk, from the savannah? Well, the gazelle population, passive investing, would explode. Notice that passive investing is now 65% of the entire market. But then they'd be competing for scarce water resources, inflation, and die off. And then Professor Gardner says what I think is the biggest quote in the entire movie. Correct. And when the Fed intervened in bond markets, they broke the ecosystem of capitalism. Now let's turn it back to real life. Dan, how much would you pay for the right to lose $5 billion a year?
I try to avoid it, as a matter of
Okay,
fact.
so take a look at Boeing. Boeing hasn't made a profit since 2019. What's the value of Boeing?
Right. Yeah. It's in like 110 billion or something like
No,
that.
what's the value of Boeing, not the price.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, exactly. The value should be nothing,
The
but
value is nothing.
yeah.
It's it's trading at 115 billion, 115 billion because it's trading at infinite,
Yeah.
right? But you're never going to get your your money back, right?
Right.
They haven't earned money since 2019. If you look at, so who are the buyers? It's passive and quant. The ecosystem changed. It's the biggest point in the entire movie,
Right.
right? You remove risk from an ecosystem, the ecosystem changed. It all shifted to passive and quant. There's no humans picking markets anymore. It's all being manipulated by the government, right? When the government assumes all the risk, it's the currency that's at risk. And so I think what you're sitting in, if you look behind Gardner in classroom scene number two, he's got sovereign debt crisis. The reason stocks go up every day, is because you're in a sovereign debt crisis and they're manipulating markets. During a sovereign debt crisis, stocks go up. Take a look at Venezuela or like you mentioned, Argentina, right? The day they cut interest, they in peso terms, the day they cut the peso by 52%, stocks doubled in peso terms, not in dollar terms, and not so. What you're seeing, so you would there's a quote from Guns N' Roses. You would have seen it coming, but we gave you too much time, and that's from Farcoma, which is Guns N' Roses. You're watching what's happening. It's happening every day. Again, stock market's up every day. Because why? Because they're manipulating markets because they can't pay their bills, right? They can't. If the stock market ever fell in 2008, stock market fell whatever it fell, right? It crashed. Tax receipts fell 25%. Tax receipts today are $4.7 billion dollars. If interest rate, if picture this world. If they stand aside and don't intervene in markets, interest rates will go back to 10%, like they were during the repo market spike. We have $35 trillion in debt. All of a sudden, we have debt service of 3.5 trillion. Tax receipts are 4.7. But if the now think of at 4.7, let's take 25% off of that because that's what happened to tax receipts in 2008. It would fall back to 3.5. So we'd have interest on our debt would be 3.5, and our tax receipts are 3.5. So we can't pay for anything, right? So there's no way out of this except to grow out of it. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to grow nominally faster than interest rate. That's the only way out of this, right? But in order to do that, they need to let the currency fall. And so that's what you're watching with inflation. Inflation is that's why inflation is really bad, and we're all seeing it. In my opinion, they're lying to you about that it's 2 or 3% because we're going to the grocery store and you see prices go up all the time. There's no way out of this. It's kind of like the Hotel California. The Fed can step in anytime into bond markets, but they can never leave. So now that the second biggest quote in Money Game was, in my opinion, von Havenstein, the head of the central bank in Germany, during the Weimar Republic, had a choice: print the money or trigger the revolution. So here we are at that moment that the Fed's either going to print the money or you're going to see a revolution because everything's going to blow up. So they're going to try to. So that's what I think you're about to see. I think we're about to see a currency collapse, and if you see a currency collapse, everything goes to infinite in dollar terms. Dollar terms.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. So that means that the paper that is used for buying the little numbers become less and less relevant because the scarce resources they don't really change that status. There's still only so much coffee, so much bacon, so much beef.
Correct. And so they're going to have to print money to artificially keep. When you talked about the matrix, that's what you're living in.
Mhm.
So if I asked a 5-year-old, hey, how much would you pay for the right to lose 5 billion a year? They're going to say nothing. Why would I buy that?
Mhm.
But financial professionals don't understand it because they're seeing the price. Well, the price is 110 billion. We
Mhm.
all know the value there. It's
Right.
not hard math.
Right, right, and it's pretty wild. Maybe I'm a lucky guy that I've been in businesses for long enough, and I'm the right age. Like when Airbnb came around, I'm like, oh, okay, so you mean hotels without the government shaking down quite as much for like licensing and that sort of thing, and then of course Uber comes along and says, oh, you mean taxis without the government coming and shaking down in the form of licensing and all that kind of stuff. Like these are not new ideas, and so how on earth are because like these are the things where like if the government has a perfectly good shakedown they're not just going to be. It's like, oh well, I guess we just can't do that anymore, and so that's why I think that I think that's some of the other parts that you're really getting at when it comes to these stocks. Being traded at infinite value, even though it's just basically smoke and mirrors. But not talking about smoke and mirrors. How many film festivals did you say that this film has already won?
We've won 5 film festivals. So
Five film festivals.
we're
Okay.
actually at our sixth film festival today. It's the DC All Black Film Festival.
All right. All right. Excellent.
Our protagonist is African American.
Okay. And this is the weekend of August the 16th.
Yep, it's there
Yeah.
tonight actually. Yeah,
Okay.
the film will be in DC tonight.
Okay, great. So then I'll try to get this produced and out there as quickly as possible so people can still attend. But so as far as becoming so your role inside this independent film, you mentioned that you're the executive producer and basically you're the inspiration for getting the message out there. And then of course every film that gets out there, it really is a team effort. I guess the first question is like how do you get into it? And if you want to go through the context of if somebody has no friends, family, or cash, what needs to change in order, like if that's your big aspiration, is to have an actual film that actually is the quality to win in film festivals and get screenings and things like that. What's somebody in for?
I will say it's very hard. It's very hard, and so you have to know what you're doing. And I don't think I knew when I was doing it. I just knew I had a topic that was really important that had to be told. I had a story that I knew had to be told. If you think about the Boston International Film Festival, they had 5,000 films submitted. They only took 17. So to get into a film festival is really, really hard. And so here's how we went about it. But I'm not sure if I can encourage people to jump into this industry because it's just so hard. Um, I raised the money. We ended up raising the money to get the film. We went to conferences, things like that. We knew we had a topic. We knew that we had something that was near and dear to people. Um, we were trying to make the point that we're not living in a capitalist system. We're living in a centrally planned economy, and people were starting to notice it. That nothing makes sense. I mean, GameStop. Why would GameStop trade at $20 billion when they lose money and nobody buys their games there? So I knew I had a topic that was really important. So the first thing we did was we wrote a script. Then we had the script. Then we went to conferences to try to basically make the point to investors that they should invest with us. But I will tell you, movies is a hard business, especially as an independent. So I'm not sure if I can tell people to jump into the movie business necessarily because it's so hard. But
Right.
once we got into Boston, we won the film festival. We won best film and best screenplay. But there's a lot of films that didn't, right? And when I heard that from the from my director I was there, but when I saw that we won, I told him, I said we got to get this out because we're not going to get into another film festival. It's too hard. Because it's just too hard. I mean, anytime you get into film festivals without big actors, it's hard to. A lot of these films aren't even going to look at you. A lot of these film festivals, right? But then once we started winning, we've actually now gotten into 5, and we won 5, which is crazy. But I can't tell you, I can't tell anyone to say jump into it because the odds of being successful in films is low.
Excellent, and I'm glad because what I was typing to myself for my mental note, it was I wanted to see like you gave your reasons for why you can't really encourage people to get into the movie industry, and I've seen on Masterclass, I've seen Martin Scorsese, a few different people who are directors mention that you should really only be a director, for example, and I think that this goes to all the major roles in creating film. You should only do it if you really don't have a choice in the sense of like you need to do it. Like it's just who you are you know, because otherwise you're just going to throw in the towel, I think. But my question was, do you think that it's tough to be in the movie business because it's fun to make movies? Like, I mean, it's a lot more fun than, perhaps bookkeeping, I guess. Or do you think it's because it's expensive and therefore, people don't want to watch low quality content? You mentioned the actors. Or maybe it's people's time is at a greater premium now. Why do you think the movie industry is so tough?
Distribution is hard. It's hard to get distribution. If you're a big studio, then and if you have big actors, it's easier because if you have Matt Damon, people are going to want to see it because it's got Matt Damon in it. But if you don't have those big those big actors, it's just hard to get noticed,
Hmm.
right? I think we've crossed that line. We're definitely getting noticed. The professor in our movie is Naheem Garcia, who's fantastic in the movie. He was also in Holdovers. He's a great guy. He's a better guy than he's a great actor, but I have to say he's probably a better guy than he's an actor. I just love Naheem, but he was in Holdovers, and he's becoming big. And so I think we have that's one of our big actors. You also saw Daniel Washington, who's fantastic in this movie. Katie Lynn Johnson, who's the nicest person in the world. That would be an argument to make films. Because the actors are trying to get noticed, and they're really great people. And so we were just thrilled to have. You saw that we had some great actors in this. We had great
Definitely,
acting. And
definitely. The soundtrack also I thought was very well chosen. I think the music was very well chosen.
so that's Daniel Hamu, who is our composer. He had an orchestra of 18 people. I also don't want. I also want to give credit to our crew. Our crew shot Coda, which won Best Film at the Oscars. So they are a talented crew, and you see it in the quality of the film. Quality of the film is very high. We don't have this huge actors, but we have great actors. I wouldn't trade one of them for someone with a bigger name because they just all do such a great job.
Yeah, yeah. I do recall seeing one actor I thought I recognized, which was the supervisor who started a meeting with an HR person in there as well. I'm trying to be cryptic for the audience to not give it away, but that supervisor, boss, manager at the hospital, I seem to recall that I recognized his face possibly from some comedies in the last few years.
That's actually Chris Owen from American Pie.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I thought I recognized him. So yeah, that's so there's somebody that people would recognize from something else as well.
We
So
have big actors like Chris Owen was in there. We have Sal Rendino from Billions, who's this kind of our CNBC reporter. We have Chris Sidbury was in I Want to Dance with Somebody with about Whitney Houston's life. As a matter of fact, Daniel Washington was Whitney Houston's brother in I Want to Dance with Somebody, and Naheem Garcia was also a preacher in that movie. So they all kind of know each other. And honestly, I will say one of the most important, the most important person we hired for this movie was Daniel Washington, because I would argue Daniel was also our casting director, because the first one we hired was our lead, right? And then he went and said, "Well, I know all these other people that were in I Want to Dance with Somebody. I have friends of mine that have actors and actresses." And he actually was our casting director. He also helped write part of the script. He was just a home run.
excellent, excellent. So then, as far as the financial background part, so if I think that you're not going to be in charge of a portfolio or a fund or something like that, or have any real impact unless you've got a degree, as far as I'm concerned, and that takes real money. You'll have to, either vie for scholarships or, have the friends, family, or cash that I mentioned earlier. But what are some things where if you want to build something enormous that gets into the billions, what about that as far as what somebody needs to cultivate or remove from their life?
You're saying something to create a business, or we're talking about movies?
Now we're talking about the financial side, so we're talking about the fund that you were involved with. You mentioned that it went from
Oh, right.
$20 million up to what was it, 7 billion?
Okay,
You said.
7 billion. So that is hard. It's a lot harder today than it was back then. I don't think stocks. So I don't think stocks. I think stocks since 2008. I think stocks have disconnected in fundamentals. As you heard Professor Gardner say, The Fed is supposed to be like a referee in a football game. No one's supposed to notice them. But now they flipped the field and broke the scoreboard. I believe what you're watching is a broken scoreboard. So if you notice the companies that lose the most money go up the most. The
Hmm.
companies that make the most money go down the most. I think the system is literally broken, which, by the way, is the closing quote in the movie. If passive ever gets bigger than active, there'll be chaos and catastrophe. Our markets will fail. I think the entire market now is disconnected from fundamentals. If you notice, what we had in the movie, we had Daniel Washington represents the real economy. Whereas Bryson Hill in the movie, which is Terrence McFadden Jr., represents the financial economy. And I think what they by the Fed intervening in markets, they broke the entire ecosystem, right? So, which is, by the way, the theme of the movie. Capitalism requires risk to allocate scarce resources. Once they stepped in and intervened in markets, now the entire system is misallocating resources, which slows the real economy. And that's why you see that productivity is at a 75-year low in the real economy. So what I did is I saw a problem in the world, which, by the way, is the white paper that I wrote, the $340 trillion problem, is that the Fed's manipulating markets. And it's not capitalism anymore, right? Because capitalism efficiently allocates scarce resources. But this isn't capitalism. So what I saw is to me, I thought I saw the biggest problem in the world. There's a quote from is a slogan, I should say, from Larry Lepard. He's a gold guy. He says, fix the money, fix the world." What he's really referring to is go back to the gold standard and get rid of the Fed, right? So I saw something that was I thought was the biggest thing in the entire world. Think about this: the entire system is pouring trillions of dollars into Dogecoin, GameStop, CloudStrike, Boeing, companies that lose money, right? And so you have in the movie you saw the villain in the movie is the CEO of Tappet. It's kind of like Snapchat, TikTok, right? And he's sitting there going, he's got both his middle fingers up like this. He's like, James, they just played basketball. James, why do you think my company is trading at $4 billion? And then he turns and he goes, the concept, man. Turns both middle fingers and goes, and I'm the concept, right? Then he taps the guy in the head and he says, don't show up next week because they were playing basketball. And he walks out. He believes that, and think about Mark Zuckerberg, you know, Dorsey from that was at Twitter for a while, Elon Musk. They all think it's them that's driving it, but it's not. It's because interest rates in real terms are negative. And I would argue inflation is higher than interest rate now. Interest rates, I think, are 4.3%. I think inflation's higher. So who would ever buy a bond with a negative yield from a country that's monetizing its debt? Think about if you went over, if you looked at Zimbabwe and you said, oh my God, look, they're offering 4% interest rates and inflation's 10. I'm going to go buy those bonds and lose 6% a year. Think of how ridiculous that is. But that's what you're seeing in real markets.
Hmm. Hmm.
I
Wow.
think eventually they're going to have to buy I think the Fed's going to have to step in and buy every single bond, which can end the dollar's global reserve status. And I think that's what you're watching. I think Money Game what I've been saying for 2 years now is Money Game will timestamp the biggest currency shift in history.
Hmm.
And here we are. They're going to have to step in soon at some point. They're manipulating markets, and I think we're probably 6 months away, is my opinion. But and that's when Money Game should be delivered to streaming platforms.
All right. All right. Exciting stuff. So, if people want to reach out, I know that LinkedIn is where we spend a lot of time interacting when that happens. I'm spending all sorts of time there. If you want to do me a solid, I should mention that you can hit the subscribe button because that way those deadbeats at YouTube actually start paying for these videos with their phony money and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I think that'd be fantastic if I could pull that off. But Chris, you want people to reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, you can type in you can go into LinkedIn, Chris Galizio. You can go on Money Game Film on Instagram, moneygamefilm.com. And you just look out for Money Game. We are at theaters right now. We're at a few theaters. We don't have the budget to go across the whole country. We're going one theater at a time, maybe two, three theaters at a time, but it should be on platforms within 6 to 8 months.
All right, excellent. So thanks for joining me today, Chris. This has been absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to play you again on some chess.
Anytime, Dan. Good seeing you.
Sweet. Thanks.